Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, JD Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join JD now and listen in on this leading conversation.
Thanks for joining us on the Excel Leadership Network podcast. We are very excited today to have Josh Ferris from Loveland, Colorado. It's Loveland. So the Loveland man is here. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, JD. Yeah, it's I'm not sure that I represent necessarily the whole kind of Loveland vibe of what's going on out here. We've got a bunch of hearts and everything hanging up around the town, so people take it seriously.
Do they really?
Oh yeah, you can actually. There's actually a program where you can send your Valentine cards through Loveland, Colorado, and there's a special stamp that a bunch of mostly old ladies kind of sit in the post office, and they give a special Loveland Valentine stamp, and then send your letter to whoever it's going to.
Well, if anybody listening to this podcast wants that done, just send your Valentines to Josh Ferris, Loveland, Colorado. That's all the address you'll need.
Right. Cash donations appreciated.
Hey, Josh, tell us your story. Just growing up, how you came to Christ.
Yeah, well, I grew. My family was a Christian family. I grew up kind of in a pretty legalistic church. The church was legalistic, and so that was kind of my family's first experience with church. And so they kind of thought that was what you just did. And so I grew up in that environment, and it was pretty tight, as it is. And by the time I got out of high school, my wife and I had actually met in high school. And so we were dating. I got out of high school, and from about a year after I got out of high school, it really started to go downhill with me personally. A lot of stuff that my wife wasn't aware of, or my soon-to-be wife wasn't aware of at that point.
I was thinking, wait a minute, you got married?
Yeah. I mean, we got married young, but it wasn't that young. And I just really started kind of to drift out of that. It was never a faith that was mine. It was always my parents at that point in time. We got married, went to college, dropped out of college, got married. I joined the Marines. That's always an interesting story for Carrie to tell, because we had been married about 6 months, and she came home from work one day, and I was at the kitchen table with a recruiter signing papers to join the Marines. And she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, we talked about this." And, in retrospect, as we laugh about it now, it was like we had mentioned it. That was something I wanted to do, but we never really, firmed it up. But so she was pretty surprised about that. So that happened. And really
I would just want to say, guys, do not try this at home. Don't join the Marines without getting your spouse's approval. So,
and it was made even worse by the fact that she was having to sign papers that said, like, "Hey, don't expect any financial assistance from us. Don't come knocking on our door. Your husband's going off and doing whatever he's got to do." So she's having to do all that. She was like 21, I think, at the time. So she's trying to process all that.
You said that you can look back and laugh at it, but when you tell the story, I'm not sure Carrie's laughing yet.
She is now, but there was probably a solid decade where she was not laughing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a crazy season. We got we had our first child within the next probably year or two, and so we did a lot of things young, and it was really me trying to push back against what I would later come to realize. It was trying to push back against all this control and this legalism. And so my response to, "Hey, I don't want people to control me," is first get married young. And then I was like, well, this isn't working out so well. And then I joined the military. That's got to be where you go, if you don't want people telling you what to do. So it was me really trying to find something I didn't even know that I was looking for at that point in time. And so that season then, after I joined the military, was probably 5 or 6 years of just a downhill, spiral for me. And we went through, quite a bit of stuff with our marriage, and I had made some pretty substantially bad choices, and we're really kind of on the verge. Carrie and I'll talk about it now. We've kind of told our story in other places before, but we're on the verge really of divorcing. And if it weren't for the kids, we probably would have. And so we were at the point where we were just done. And there was so much tension and so much bitterness and just walls between us that we didn't see any way past that. And kind of turn of events, some people that we met and some things that God had begun to do even in my own heart really led me to the point where I said, hey, I've done this for a long time. I've tried to find whatever it is I'm trying to find on my own. And I kind of had in the back of my head, I knew what the gospel was. I had just never really taken it seriously or accepted it. And I always say it was kind of like C.S. Lewis. I can't remember what book he wrote this in, but he said, it was like I was taking a walk and somewhere between like 3rd and 5th Street, I found Jesus. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but it was somewhere between this point in my life and this point in my life. And I was the same way. There was no like moment where I went down front and had like, this massive, like salvation moment experience where I prayed the prayer and, felt that, this, that, other thing. But there was definitely a time in my life where between when I was completely turned my back against God and a point in time where there was a clear, definitive decision to follow him and accept the gospel and to live like it. That was kind of when I really made the decision to follow God at that point in time. And that was mid to late 20s, around 26 years old. By that time, there was a ton of damage between me and Carrie. And so really my faith is kind of what sustained us coming out of that. And it took us a couple of years. And at this point in time, I was kind of rounding out the end of my military experience. I had gotten out and went into commercial project management in Chicago is where we were living. And so through that season, God began to change my heart and I began to make some shifts and then eventually kind of put everything on the table with Carrie and I and said, hey, if we're going to make it, if we're going to move forward, we got to get everything on the table. We got to fix whatever needs to be fixed. We got to walk whatever, dark journey, difficult journey we got to walk. And we walked it. And it was years. It took us a couple of years really to get, substantially out of a place where there was health and where there was healing and we could actually begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that season for us really galvanized, I think, in each of us, in Carrie and I both, our dependence upon Christ, our acknowledgement of his ability to do inside of us what we never thought it was possible, not just individually, but as a couple as well. And so that was, probably into my early 30s, at which point in time, at that point, I was pretty much out of the military and doing project management full time. We never, at one point in time, we thought my unit was going to deploy. This was around in 2001 and then in 2002 and never deployed. Got out about a year later. My unit never deployed. I was in a reserve unit at that point in time. And, I'd done a bunch of cool stuff and it was always this kind of big disappointment for me. Carrie loved it. She was, freaked out that we were going to get deployed, as a lot of people were. And I was really hoping we would. I extended a couple of times, tried to stay in the military as long as I could. They were wanting me to sign another contract and it was just time to get out. And so got out of that, was full-time in project management, and then kind of ran across some people at a church that we were involved with because we had kind of come back to church at that point in time. We'd been out of it for some time. We talk about church wounds and hurt and all that kind of stuff. And we were kind of coming out of that. And so we really need to get back into church and met a couple that really walked with us through some difficult times and eventually wound up challenging us to consider going into ministry. And I don't know if you want to go there now, kind of transition into ministry story, but
yeah, I'd like to, but I do want to say it sounds incredibly brave that you would just say, hey, let's get all our cards on the table and just walk through this. Sounds like you guys have really done the work.
I don't know that it was bravery so much as it was, I just felt like at that point in time that God was telling me, if I'm ever going to use you, you have to get all this stuff on the table. Because imagine if I use you and move you into places and stuff comes out later on down the road that you haven't dealt with, you haven't healed from, and you haven't made amends with, and there's still this kind of level of hiding things. And it just seems so clear to me. It's like, that's absolutely right. There's no way God's going to ever use me if I've got all this baggage that I've never kind of dealt with and really put on the table with Carrie and said, hey, here's who I've been. And it almost wasn't right for me to not give her the option of getting out if she can. She would have had every right to, and so I put these cards on the table just as a way to say, hey, God, if you want to use me, I'm letting you, kind of manage how this goes forward. In Carrie's heart, there was a lot at risk, losing my family. And so when I put that out, I had to have a couple of people around me. I had been in counseling for many months, trying to get up to that point, figure out how to do it well. Where did I need to be? What was the right process? I had this other friend of mine that, walked with me through that and encouraged me and supported me through that whole process. But it was probably the hardest thing in my life that I had to do, certainly to that point. And even to this day, it's one of the top 2 hardest things that I've ever had to walk through. So it wasn't easy. That's for sure.
Wow. Well, hey, yeah, do talk about your stepping into ministry.
Yeah. I never wanted to be in ministry. Some people are like, hey, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pastor. I never wanted to. My wife said at one point in time, she said, I think you're going to be a pastor one day. And I said, we can't swear in the podcast, but I was like, I will never be a pastor. So, I was not in any way in the place where I wanted to be a pastor. And it really was God just moving me into something where it was like, he had equipped us, he had put it in us, and he had painted the path, I feel like, so clearly and said, do this so clearly. It didn't make any sense to me. I had no experience in ministry. I had never been on staff. I didn't go to Bible college, none of that stuff. And I said, okay, fine, God, you want to do it. I'm going to put out like 10 resumes and that's it. And you're either going to make something happen out of those 10 resumes or I'm not doing it. I'm going to take this as a sign, like I'm moving on. And we put it out there and, we got like the typical job you get as your first time in ministry with no experience, which is like the combination student pastor, worship pastor job,
church janitor, facilities director.
Whatever other duties as assigned. I mean, that was basically my entire job description. And we moved. I mean, I was making great money as a project manager in Chicago. And we moved to San Antonio area, Texas, and took about a 2/3 pay cut, moving to San Antonio, and we're working for next to nothing. But thankfully, we had sold our house, and so we had zero debt. Everything was paid off. We had no debt. The kids were little. Carrie was homeschooling them at the time, and so God had kind of managed it to get us in a place where we could actually make it. But it was by the skin of our teeth, so to speak. But got into that and realized that I didn't want to do student ministry. I was not a very appropriate student pastor. A lot of the things that I did, a lot of the dads liked, but I had quite a few moms that were just like, they were not happy with the stuff that I was doing. And so it wasn't anything that was like inappropriate or illegal or anything. It was just like the activities that I would play where I'll give you one example. I
just want to say it's really good that you weren't doing anything illegal.
You never know what kind of legs these podcasts are going to sprout. Right. So I just want to make that very, very clear here.
And I didn't get the memo that you can't swear on these. So that's good to know. Thank you for bringing that up.
It was just an assumption, just trying to help you guys out in your editing process. But one of the things I did with the kids was I had them drink a whole glass of milk, and then I had them drink a whole glass of 7-Up, and then we had jumping jack competitions to see who could go the longest. And the winner finally got down to the end and projectile vomited, white fizzy liquid out of his mouth. I'm not even kidding, like 5 feet out of his mouth, nails one of the youth workers in the back on his way out the door. And kids in the front are just like sympathy dry heaving. It was like about 60 seconds of literal mass chaos. And there were a couple of parents that were like, yeah, you crossed the line there, buddy. You can't do that.
Didn't you just say, hey, we had an exorcism tonight? That's what we were doing.
See, if I'd have had your kind of experience and wisdom, Jay, that's exactly what I said. But I didn't have that much experience at that point in time. So I quickly realized my student ministry was not for me. And so was in worship ministry, did that for a few years. moved over to southeast Texas, over the Houston area, and jumped on there in full-time worship ministry, and then transitioned onto executive staff, and then took over the creative department. And that was a great church. We loved it. Great people. Still stay in contact with them. I was just emailing them the other day about some stuff, and had a great opportunity to really kind of see how big organizations are run, and had an opportunity to really kind of do a second chair turnaround in that location, which was a ton of fun. Had a great team, and got a chance to raise up a bunch of younger guys and gals that would go on to do great things. Matter of fact, one of the guys that had just got out of high school that mentored with me at that time is coming in 2 weeks to lead worship up here at Restoration. So that's kind of a cool, series of events. So did that. And then it was one of those things where we had no idea why in the world God was moving us out of that church. Everything was going great. There was no real reason. It was just like God was saying, hey, it's time to move on. And so we went through the process of moving up here to Colorado. That was in 2015, and got up here and kind of went backwards in my career. I went back into leading worship, and again, didn't really want to lead worship, but I talked to the pastor that was my boss at the time up here and said, hey, I can be a 3 to 5 year guy for you, help you turn this thing around. He'd kind of wanted to do some strategic and operational shifts and everything. And I said, hey, I've been down this road. I can help you turn this thing around, but I'm 3 to 5 years. And within about 6 months, switched over to executive pastor at that church, and then finished out my time there as executive pastor. And in that process, God began to move us around year 3, this idea of church planting. And I almost felt like it was the beginning again, where I was like, hey, I don't want to be a pastor. It's like, I don't want to be a church planter. This isn't something that I wanted to do. I felt like maybe I was going to go on to be in a lead position, but I had no experience really with church planting whatsoever. And so it was kind of a season where Carrie and I had to jump back in again and really push into what God was directing us to do. It was a good job that we were in. There was no problems, but felt like God was just calling us to plant this church. And so I guess that was the end of 2017. So 2018, we jumped into the pre-launch phase, and then started down the church planting route, and didn't really have any idea what we were doing. And luckily the pastor I was working for as executive pastor, he had planted a church 20 years ago. So he had, he was able to help us out with some of that. They helped us out, kind of as in a parenting sort of situation with that. And that's maybe worth noting as well. We hear a ton of stories about churches that go through, or church planters that go through a lot of crap to plant their church, especially with the church that they're coming from. We actually had a great experience, and we had a church and a pastor that supported us, that loved us, that helped us, that I'm still connected with. I just had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago, and we just had a great experience in terms of kind of our sending church. And so, again, I know we hear a lot of rough stories, but we had a great one. And so we're super thankful for that experience, because it was unique, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, you launched in 2019, kind of right before COVID. You get up, you get going, it's looking good, and then the world shuts down. What was that like?
Yeah, we were probably 125 on the weekends, which for a 1-year-old church, we thought like, that's pretty good. We had a budget that was growing. We had things were rocking and rolling. We were involved in the community. Things were going great. About 1 year in, we planted in February of 2019. And so February of 2020, 1 year birthday, big celebration, blah, 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 and then like a month later, COVID is hitting. And like everybody, I won't tell a lot of the details of the story because it's the same as everybody's story. We scrambled to get online. We weren't online to do all of these things. And, I think it's been an interesting season, because the way I've described it to our church is I've had to learn the skill of holding the mountaintops and the valleys in the same hand at the same time. Because I had always kind of experienced a lot of life and ministry and growth as a disciple as mountaintop, then valley, mountaintop, then valley. And in 2020, it was like we were seeing God do cool things, but at the same time, we were experiencing so much difficulty. And so it was like, how do you hold those at the same time and appreciate them for what they are? at the very same time. And that was something I had never had to do before. And so it really began to be this season where God was showing us that, hey, I'm going to bring you some good things, that you're going to need to celebrate and acknowledge and be grateful for. And at the exact same time, sometimes on the same day, here's a story. On the day we launched, on our launch Sunday, my son was in jail. He was 16, I think, at the time. And he was being held because of some decisions that he had made. And so on the very day that we are launching a church and supposed to have all the excitement and all of the joy and all of the energy, we're also dealing personally with the fact that our son is in jail, and we're trying to deal with that. And that thread has continued. JD, I've talked to you extensively about this, but we've dealt with a lot of stuff. And so we've had to learn how to hold mountaintops and valleys in the same hand at the same time, to not miss the beauty of the mountaintops, but at the same time, to not ignore the fact that the valleys are painful, and to learn how to grieve and to learn how to acknowledge loss and lean on Christ and ask him, what are you teaching us? And if we're lucky, maybe we know after the fact what he's teaching us, but a lot of times we just don't. And so it's been a season of learning to rely on his plan. We're in a thing right now. I told you we had lined something up with an organization as a ministry thing. Well, it was Apartment Life. I won't say we had a situation worked out with them, and we were supposed to move into a place this month.
Today, I think.
It was supposed to be today. Yep. February 1st. And just some issues with the property owner here locally that they had a change in gears. And we just found out this morning that is a completely closed door for us. And, we just signed a lease. Yes. This is ironic. We just signed a lease yesterday to lease our house. We just finalized the lease yesterday and found out today that where we were going to go completely 100% fell through. So we've just been in this season of God doing all kinds of crazy stuff and just trying to go, God, what are you trying to teach us? And almost having to go, I'm done trying to put my hands on this thing. It's like, God, whatever you're going to do, we're just going to go wherever you tell us to go. If it's an open door, I'm going to walk through it. If it's closed, I'm going to kick it a couple of times to make sure that that it's really closed. But then if it's closed, I got to move on, right? I got to do something else. And so it's been a season for us of learning, of reliance, of faith. And there's been days when it's been just really, really difficult. So not to paint an overly grim picture, because I think we still have hope and we still have some beautiful things have happened in spite of all of this, but no doubt, COVID has, and the results of COVID, I would say, maybe more specifically, have been a challenge for us.
Well, it's encouraging to see you still kicking down those doors or kicking the doors. So you're homeless right now, basically? Is that the deal?
I'd say legally. Yeah. I feel like a little bit like a squatter right now in my own house. But as of March 1st, they're supposed to take occupancy here. And so we actually have about 30 days to figure out, what it is we're going to do. So, and part of me is like, that's a little bit nerve wracking, but we've been around this chaos long enough to where it's like, well, I'm sure God has something, and we just don't know what that is yet, but we're going to, continue to walk down this road and be smart and make wise decisions and take whatever opportunity God puts in front of us.
Maybe one of the listeners has a nice little basement they can open up for you starting in March 1st. Hey, thanks for sharing your story. Let me just end with this. Tell us just one word of encouragement to leaders. You've been through it. You talked about two difficult things. You shared those with us. What would you say about leadership that we need to know?
Yeah, I'll draw somewhat of a connection to the military. There's some science that actually looks at PTSD and some cases of PTSD. And I want to make the distinction here. I'm talking about some cases, not every case, and in some cases, PTSD is brought on by the difference between expectation and reality. What was expected, what was prepared for, what was imagined, what was envisioned was so drastically different than what actually happened that the brain struggles to actually deal with that. And so I think that for me, what I've learned is to manage that and to understand if we go into something and we think that, ministry is going to be this piece of cake. I don't know anybody that really does. We all know it's going to be difficult. We all know it's going to be challenging. But I think to actually realize that when we actually pray for faith, God, build my faith. Well, God doesn't just magically zap me with faith. He gives me opportunities to exercise my faith, which always means something's going to come up. It's going to be challenging for me, and I'm going to have to actually be willing to step into it. My reality is it's going to be way more difficult maybe than I imagined in the beginning. And so I think so much of it comes down to mindset, how much we actually grasp onto, how much we actually expect, and to be open-handed, to be willing to allow God to move us in directions that we never would have anticipated. And the most peace, I think, comes from the realization that God is in control. He's a good God who gives all good gifts, and he's proven himself to be faithful. And as long as I can remain faithful and trust him, that reduces my anxiety level substantially. So that's my thought.
Thanks for that. Thanks for your faith, for your perseverance and your encouragement, and hang in there. And if you need a vacation, we got a guest room.
Okay.
That we can find in somebody else's house. That's not our. I'm not good at that.
You better talk to Lori about that first.
Yeah. That's not our deal. But anyway, we'll be praying that you and I'll be looking forward to hearing where you guys are living. So
yeah, thanks, JD.
Hey, thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.